Hello, good afternoon, and welcome to CIO Leadership Live. I'm your host, Mary Fran Johnson, the CEO of Mary Fran Johnson Media and a contributing columnist on CIO.com. Twice a month, we produce this video show and podcast to stream live to you on both LinkedIn and on IDG's Tech Talk channel on YouTube. Today's episode is sponsored by Cisco, the worldwide leader in technology that powers the internet. Cisco is inspiring new possibilities by reimagining your applications, securing your data, and transforming your infrastructure, all to empower your teams for the future. Learn more about what they're up to at newsroom.cisco.com. We welcome all of our viewers today, especially those that are joining us live, to take part in this conversation and send in questions of your own. We'll be watching for those on the social media feeds on LinkedIn and on YouTube and doing our best to pass them along to our guest. And my guest today, I'm very pleased to welcome Kieran Venkamamiti, who is the Group Vice President and Global CIO of Driscoll's. Kiran joined Driscoll's in 2017 and then became the global CIO of this California-based berry company the following year. Many of us likely enjoyed some of the company's products with our breakfast this morning. As the worldwide market leader of fresh strawberries, blueberries, blackberries, and raspberries, Driscoll's controls about 1/3 of the $10 billion U.S. berry market. Headquartered in Watsonville, California, this family-owned and operated company has been in business for more than 100 years, and today is growing berries in 21 countries and selling them in 48. Now, before he joined the company, Kiran was part of he was an associate CIO at Herbalife, where he spent 10 years at another multinational global company. And before that, he was a senior manager at EMC Corporation. Among the many topics we'll be touching on and discussing today are how the rise of touchless technologies accelerated during the past year or so, and what Kiran and his team are experiencing today on the leading edge of farm to consumer trends. Thanks so much for joining us, Kiran. It's great to have you here.
Thank you, Mary Fran, for this opportunity. I really appreciate that.
Yes. Well, I'm sure we're going to have a very interesting conversation. There's so much going on in your field. We usually start with that really big picture view of the disruption of the past year or more and the impact that that's had on your business. Tell us how this has had an impact on Driscoll's and what sort of thinking it has changed for how you go forward with your business today.
So Driscoll's, we are one of those lucky businesses where the business was not that much impacted. We have multiple sales channels that we sell through. Our retail business was pretty strong. So companies like Costco's, Kroger's, and Whole Foods, they were actually taking on additional orders. But we also sell to the wholesale business where we sell it into our product into the food markets, and that business pretty much disappeared. Those are the ones that actually supply fruit to the hotels and restaurants and other areas. But that was completely compensated by additional requests for our product from the retail business. So we actually came off, we were lucky in that way that we came off very well last year.
Well, one of the big topics on so many CIOs' minds these days are whatever the return to office or return to office building strategies are going to be. I think we've pretty all come around to, calling it the hybrid workplace. And tell us how that is going to work for Driscoll's and what kind of a pace or what sort of thinking you're bringing to that.
Yeah, so our IT department or IS department, Information Services Department, has been the leading edge of piloting the hybrid working environment. This is, in a way, IS departments or IT departments, they always have been remote working or hybrid working, right? That there was not an option for us. So at Driscoll's, what we are trying to do is not forcing any particular methodology on the employees. The company has decided that it would actually give the responsibility to bring people in based on the roles they are in. So there is some independence given to the department heads
Yeah.
to figure out role by role which roles could be enabled as a fully remote, which roles could be hybrid, and which roles could be which should be on site, right? So
Right.
and we are slowly making progress against that. So I'm glad that I'm at this company where the keys have been given to the department heads to manage their departments as required.
Yes, I know that seems I've had so many conversations with CIOs about empathy and greater thoughtfulness on the part of everyone who's involved in all the situations over the last year or more. And I think that there is no great rush to try and return everything to the way it was in early 2020. Are you also, I know you have a very close-knit group of CIOs there in California that you stay in touch with. Is this what you're hearing from others across the board?
Yes, well, one thing we have to understand is every company is different. Every company is in a business that has different parameters that they have to accommodate, but the conversations are pretty similar. There are some companies that are very hands-on, so they have to come in, and so CIS are empowering their teams
Yes.
to take the right decisions. If there are opportunities for us through technology to enable their workforce to be hybrid or remote, that's where the CIOs are fully contributing.
Well, and you just mentioned, you said the IS group, but for IS, you've actually changed the name of the technology services group at Driscoll's when you got there. That's part of what you did as you became CIO. Talk about that a little bit more.
So I wouldn't take that credit for myself. I was fortunate enough before my current job and in previous job as well. I had worked under great leadership, and that leadership has ingrained in me what this information technology or services is all about.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, my department is a service organization. So by changing the name to information services, I wanted to make sure that the entire department understands and takes it to heart
Yes.
when they're actually working for the business to empower the business to make sure that business is successful. So how can we become better partners by offering the services that we bring to the table? So
Excellent. Yeah. I run
that
into other versions of that where CIOs have renamed it digital services or digital solutions or digital delivery. There's just a lot of, I think that brings a more expansive view of the role that IT has been playing in so many companies over the last few years. Just before we leave the topic of returning to the office, do you have any specific advice? Because you have a great deal of leadership experience, both at EMC and Herbalife and now at Driscoll's. When you think about navigating the coming year, what sort of advice are you imparting to others, or would you tell your younger self, I guess, when you think about the things that you should you mentioned taking it thoughtfully and going easy and all, but for people that are going to be coming back to hybrid workplaces, the office and home, what sort of advice do you have?
I think we should. For me, it's four things that are very important. One is make sure that whatever plan it is, it's individualized, right? So it is understand your team, understand the team members that are part of your team, and try to work out a plan with them. Because there are people within my team, in spite of IS saying that we are going to be fully remote for the foreseeable future, few of the team members came back and said, I can't do that. Can you
Right.
find me a space? So it's a complete
Please.
counterintuitive, right? So it has to be an individualized plan. Number one. Number two, define the expectations. What are the expectations that you have to set when you're saying that people can work remote or hybrid or on-prem? Make sure that the promotions, the recognitions, all of that are equalized among the entire team. It's not lopsided towards people coming into work versus some people staying at home. The third one would be to make sure that you trust your team, build that trust, and
Yes.
then that could be accelerated by having those individualized plans, right? Because once the team members understand that it's not a generic plan that people are pushing on me, the trust builds. So you have to have regular meetings with the team members and groups of team members, and figure out what works. And the last but not the least, believe in the talent. That at the end of the day, your team members are always trying to do the right thing for the business. And what can you do to support them in their journey? Because this is something that is unique, right? So on March 17th last year, 2020, nobody knew how March 18th will work for anybody. All of a sudden, on March 17th, we were given a directive: everybody goes home. And suddenly, March 18th worked out, March 19th worked out, and here we are on June 16th, 2021, and still working. And some of the companies have thrived through that period. So believe in your talent. So those are the four major things that I would actually keep in mind.
Yes. Well, good. That's actually really good advice. Well, and that may also be why you had mentioned that inside of Driscoll's, for the other senior executive teams, a lot of the new approaches that get tried out first with you and the information services.
Yeah, the change is right. Change is pretty standard in IS department. So
yes,
it comes natural. And if we can't adapt to the change, then you can't be an IS department. So.
Right. It all reminds me of that old Dilbert cartoon where he's saying change is hard.
Yes,
you go first. so essentially the Driscoll's management says to like, let's see what Kieran's going to do. We're going to throw this out there. Now, I do understand that you've already made some changes in the physical plant. Like you used to have an entire building with your IT team worldwide is about 200 people. And I know I should be calling them the IS team, your information services team, about 200 worldwide, but you've now already decided you're going to be able to give that building back for space for other things.
Right. We actually released the lease on that building. We are taking a small hoteling space within one of our headquarters. So if any one of our team members want to come in, there are offices and cubicles that are set aside that we can register and then walk into that office to work from there.
Yeah. Well, and one of the things we talked about, and I mentioned it in your introduction, that there was, if anything, there was an acceleration in the acceptance and the rollout of touchless technology and touchless equipment. Tell us more about that. What sort of inroads did you make with some of the technology improvements that probably were on your drawing board to begin with, but were able to accelerate in the past year?
So one of the things that we had was we're being an essential business means you have to be in business, right? So and you have to make sure that all the protocols that were coming out as part of this pandemic forced on us, whether washing your hands, checking your temperature, taking tests in farms. And people don't realize that some of the things that you take for granted in an office environment, we can't actually have some of those technologies in the farm. When you're actually taking a temperature reading outside of your face, and there is sunlight and it's hot. So how do you take? So we have to be very specific on the kinds of technologies that we can use outdoors. It also is like touchless water. How do I wash my hands without having to touch the pump? Because in the farm, everything is low grade. There is no high tech stuff. So we had to swap out all of that. Both there and in warehouses, when the fruit is coming in and we are processing the fruit, there is a lot of technology that was deployed in a hurry.
And we're talking about across 70 warehouses just in the U.S., or is that global?
In our U.S. business. When I say U.S., we call it the Americas. So from Chile to Canada.
Okay.
We had to, because we have a network of warehouses. The reason why we have so many warehouses is the fruit grows in all sorts of great regions, right? The strawberries are so tasty, but it grows in a very remote place. It requires certain type of soil and certain type of atmosphere. It grows in beautiful places, but you just have to get there.
Hmm.
The problem of the supply chain is that it's a highly fresh business, right? So we
Right.
have to have warehouses 2 hours from where we harvest the fruit.
Hmm.
As soon as the fruit comes in, you have to cool the fruit to 33 degrees, and from there the cold chain picks up, and from there until the consumer, not the customer, consumer buys it, it's actually kept it at a certain temperature.
Right.
So that complicates the ultra fresh, high speed, high velocity business for us.
Right.
So our warehouses, when you walk in, there is not much fruit in there because you don't want to see any fruit. If you see that fruit is getting racked and stacked, then we are in trouble. The fruit
Yes.
comes in and it's cool for 2 hours and then it gets shipped out. So that's the fast pace that we live in.
Yeah. Well, I think, and from talking to you about this in some detail, I was surprised. I'd never really, another thoughtless American consumer. I just go to the market and assume that they're incredibly fresh berries because they're Driscolls. But they actually are much closer to farm direct to grocery store than most of us realize, isn't it?
Right. Yeah. So when we harvest the fruit and we field pack the fruit into the
Hmm.
clamshells, we call those plastic packages that you buy it from. We call them clamshells because
Yes.
they're like sort of hardy clamshells that protect the fruit. So the harvester directly packs it into that clamshell and then puts it into the trays and makes it into a lot and pallet and ships it. And we take the whole pallet or half pallets and ship it to our customers.
Hmm.
Nobody opens those clamshells until the consumer opens it. So there are a few clamshells our quality assurance team pulls out from each of the pallet,
Yeah.
reviews it, and we're using quite a bit of touchless technology over there to do the quality
Yes.
assurance as well, using artificial intelligence and machine learning processes.
Hmm.
And then once that is done, we ship it off to the customer. And the
Interesting.
first person to open it is you and me as end consumers.
I was pretty amazed at that. If I had thought about the supply chain of getting berries from the fields, the farm fields to my grocery store, I would assume there were lots more stops and packing and handling in between, and there truly are not. And when you talk about the clamshells, how many of those a year are you shipping in this way?
Last year in our US based business, we sold 1 billion clamshells.
One
So that's
billion.
pretty, yes.
Yes, yes. Well, everybody loves their fruit, don't they? So, and you had mentioned there's a new touchless technology that got accelerated in the past year that it does the sort of things that used to be done more manually about like checking sweetness and that sort of thing. Talk about that a little bit.
So all of our growers actually get the fruit back into our warehouse. So we have to make sure that the quality of the fruit that comes in is at a certain standard. So
Hmm.
we randomly pick out clamshells from individual pallet. And what we actually do is we try to measure the size of the fruit, the color of the fruit, and the look and feel of the fruit, so it's not crooked. And
Hmm.
then the dirt, and if there are any insects that are there, because it's fruit from
From
the
the
garden,
field
from the field.
directly.
So,
Yeah.
and then the last thing we also test is to make sure that the fruit has a certain Brix score, which is the sweetness
Hmm.
the score that comes out in the before our pandemic, what we were looking at was taking a plastic cover, putting the fruit in it,
Hmm.
squishing it, getting the juice out, and pouring it into a 3-inch by 2-inch machine. And it takes a couple of minutes to read the sugars from that, and then gives you a certain value. The Brix
Right.
score is 0 to 10; it has to be above 8 or 9. So um, the latest technology we have is we dump the entire batch. So it is only you're actually testing one of the fruits inside
Right.
a clamshell. The new
Interesting.
technology is you dump the fruits into this optical CIO cup. This is the cup that we use.
Hmm.
And what it does is it actually throws out a light. And based on how light is dispersed, it can tell you how much acids are there,
Hmm.
how much sugar is in there, and then it gives us a wide variety of information that we had no idea that we could measure. So our
Ah,
quality assurance process has improved significantly
yes.
in the last 1 year. So, and we continue to do other things as well
Yeah.
in that area.
Well, this is kind of where where farming meets data science and machine learning, right?
That's
What?
right. So
Mm-hmm.
we just need to understand how the fruit is, right? So the other technology that we also use is that was the taste side of it. The second side of it is to look at how does the fruit look like, right? So
Right.
how is it green or is it red or is it misshaped? Or is there any other particles on it?
Mm-hmm.
So there is a machine that it looks like a copier machine. You dump the fruit on it. It takes pictures
Oh,
from all sides.
yeah.
And so there is a lot of machine learning process that's happening to say this is the ideal fruit versus this is a crooked fruit and this is the green color and this is the
Mm-hmm.
right red color that we're looking for. And that's another technology that we're playing with. So a lot of
Interesting.
machine learning aspect that is going on there.
Yeah. Well, and I want to kind of pivot over and talk a little bit more about I love all this technology production and the role that it plays in the main business. You had mentioned that at a recent town hall, you were talking about the situation of all the different projects that you had in flight over the past year. That there was an unprecedented amount of work that got done under very disrupted circumstances over the last year. Tell us about some of the leading accomplishments that your IS group brought home for Driscoll's.
Yeah, so Driscoll's being an agro tech company, and the technology part of the R&D side of it is pretty powerful. I'll talk about that in a little while. Being
Mm-hmm.
an agricultural company, technology was always a black box. People were not comfortable with it. They don't
Mm-hmm.
understand it. If it has nothing to do with farms and growing berries, it's just a thing that we don't want to pay attention to.
Right.
So the first half of my career was in at Driscoll's was to educate up to say, open up that black box up and show the power of what IS can actually do.
Yes.
As part of that, what we did was we went to all the business units and said, what platforms or what technology are you using to run your business processes, right?
Mm-hmm.
So and we created like a value chain map for all the business units. And when we got the results back, it was red all over. It was as red as our strawberries. So
Yeah.
meaning that they did not have enough digital footprints in
Mm-hmm.
there. And so what our journey was to first take the most common things that are across all the business units. Let's think about it. The planning function, the demand planning versus the supply planning. And we are a supply constrained business. It's not like a factory,
Of
right?
course.
Where you can, let's start another shift and we can produce more berries and sell it, right? So
Yeah.
it is limited to the number of farms that we have and the number of plants that we plant in it.
Of course.
So it's a supply constrained business, but how do you manage the supply and the demand that's out in the market? And on top of it, make sure that everybody makes money, the enterprise, meaning
Mm-hmm.
the growers, the customers, and us make money. So that is the whole planning exercise that we do. Different teams does it, and different regions and business units does it in a different way. So we
Mm-hmm.
were able to go and select a partner that can actually solve that for us. So that's one of the big projects that we did. The second major one was to implement a warehouse management system
Ah,
in the
that's a very
company.
big. Yeah.
Yeah, the warehouse management system that we were running was a 19-year-old hand-built product. When we were a small company and when the company had one warehouse to run, right? So
Right.
when we compare to what is in the industry and what
Mm-hmm.
innovations have happened in the industry, it was like night and day. So that was another one that was kind of, so there was pretty significant large scale projects that were initiated, and there was many low hanging fruit projects that we took out. So that's the and being able to pull all that off in a period where everybody was working from home.
I know.
Um, it was an amazing thing. I am very fortunate to be surrounded by the people I am, both
Mm-hmm.
from my leadership team and my team,
Yeah.
that enabled me to actually get that success. It's their success, overall.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think you mentioned that, and this probably got a standing ovation, but in 13 years, the company had never had a situation where not only were all the operating projects wrapped up, but you pulled in a couple of new ones, 5 to 7 beyond that, and mastered those as well.
Right, that's the statement from the president of the company in the company town hall. So
Isn't that something?
that
Yeah,
was
of course,
something.
It would be lovely to assume that he won't assume that you need to do that again next year and do better. So,
As
so
long as
what?
they have money to spend, will take
Yeah,
it.
we are ready. So let's talk a little bit about that. What are some of your big plans for the coming year, for the rest of 21 and into 2022? What, as the global CIO, are the big projects on your list?
So the company actually grew organically, right? So they were a California-based California company. Then they
Hmm.
decided to be an America's business, so they expanded to Mexico, Chile, Peru, and all of those other countries, and
Yes.
Canada. And then they said, okay, we're going to go into Europe, and they now started doing business in Europe. And the latest venture is into China. So the
Hmm.
business units are in the various growth patterns right now. So Dota is a very mature adult. It carries the whole company. It makes all the money.
Hmm.
If you look at our European business, it's a teenager. It's growing. It doesn't know how to do it. It's figuring things out because
Yeah.
Europe has so many complexities. They're going through this local for local trends. You have to
Yes.
grow locally and all that. So that there's other complications there.
Yeah.
And China is a toddler. It just came off. It's growing fast. It has 5 teeth every other day.
Hmm.
It's figuring out the hands that it's seeing. Its hands. So
Hmm.
and we are very bullish about our Chinese business that's actually growing. Our Australia, New Zealand business is also pretty steadily growing.
Yeah.
So they are in different states. So what ended up happening was our platform or technology implementations was aligned with how the company is growing.
Hmm.
Now the company has come to a certain stage that there has to be common platforms across the whole company. All the back office functions have to be put into one platform and give flexibility to the front office so that they can go to market as it is required by those markets.
Yes.
So what we are trying to do is we are trying to engage one of the big five companies and have them come in and understand the capabilities that we have today,
Yeah.
what capabilities the company would want to have, not today, but 5 years from now and 10 years from now, so that they can run.
I see.
Uh,
Yeah.
so thinking ahead, because
Hmm.
I could easily say, yeah, we're just going to replace this ERP because this is a small ERP platform. We
Hmm.
need to strengthen that. But I'm taking it one level higher and saying, no, no, let's stop. Let's figure out where do we require to digitize, because we're running our systems and
Hmm.
processes through Excel sheets, and what capabilities that we have that we need to beef up, meaning the technology that we have. So if I could combine both the digitization process as well as digital transformation all in one, and
Yes.
try to make it into one big project, go to the board, explain the strategy to them, and ask for money once, get all of this work done in the next 2, 3 years so the company can reap all its benefits for the next 5, 7, 10 years. So
Yes.
that's the strategy that we are engaged on right now.
Well, it's an interesting interesting conundrum to be working with the board for a private, family-owned and operated company, I would imagine. And I
Right.
know they publicly disclosed that their revenues are about $4 billion.
Right.
But when we talked earlier, you'd mentioned that the board members, you're still in a process of helping them understand the difference between a big digital transformation and then just digitizing different parts of the business. How do you go about that? What have you found is very effective in working with your board?
So, and as part of the board's role, they are always challenging you. So you don't want to engage a board that is a cakewalk, right? So you tell them and they say approved.
That's a
It's
good point.
probably
Yeah.
they are doing their due diligence. I learn a lot coming out of a board meeting, because
Hmm.
they'll bring up perspectives that see, as a CIO I would probably not think of them because I'm a technology guy, right? So
Right.
um, I think this is a great board that is actually challenging you at the right level. So what we did is opening up that black box is what I said in the beginning of this conversation, where
Yeah.
trying to help them understand what technology can do to the business, right? And what we
Hmm.
are trying to do in the technology phase. So We scheduled few lunch and learn sessions with the board that meets at their eye level. We wrote a paper around what the digitization process that is tuned just for Driscoll's. Here are all the processes at the highest levels, and that can be digitized and could increase the efficiency of the company by X factor. So, without going into a lot of details, we went through multiple of those sessions. So, and there are some curious board members that actually reach back out and say, "Hey, Kiran, I didn't completely understand what you were saying. Can we spend an hour?" Which was very satisfying. That it's not only are they paying attention to you, but also they're reaching back and asking questions.
Right.
You'll see that there is an engaged audience when there are questions coming up, right? So that's one. If you're just giving a speech, then
I know. I write one of the things I do with my friends at CIO.com is I write a column about technology leaders in the boardroom. And one of the, I've interviewed a lot of experts now in this field, and I was surprised to learn that board members get very, like everybody else, they get bored and frustrated if you just come and try to present information and then leave. They really want to have that conversation because of that oversight and the governance responsibilities that they bring into that room. And I think over the last few years, CIOs have been spending more and more time with their boards, which is it's obviously been good for Driscoll's, and I think it's good for a lot of other companies as well. Let's pivot over and talk a little bit about the culture, the work culture at Driscoll's. I'm always curious about that, how you managed to maintain and keep that strong during all the difficulties of the last year and a half and more. And how would you describe the work culture there in IT and throughout the company as well?
So Driscoll's is a very vision, mission, values driven company. The vision of the company, the vision and mission of the company are so simple, but yet so powerful. The vision of the company is to become world's berry company. Simple, but it's there's so much involved in it. And the mission of the company is to we would want to to delight our consumers through an alignment between our berry growers and customers, right? So the alignment being the key word, and that's where IS becomes the most important department there, right? So based on those two vision and mission, every one of us is driven by that.
Well, and it's really exciting because it has, that idea of feeding the world something that the world really wants. And it's just, I think everybody likes to feel an appreciation and a level of mission and draw to it. But you'd also mentioned that it's a very personal culture, that it's very face to face, and that's like there'll be one salesperson who's got the relationship with a grower. How do you see that changing going forward? Are there places now where technology is able to insert itself a little more helpfully into that situation?
Yeah, it's not only technology inserting now, the new generation of growers and salespeople are demanding it. Good. In the past, it was all the team members actually show up at 5 o'clock in the morning, and the growers actually call the sales folks to say, "Hey, by the way, we're actually going to harvest about 10 pallets today. Make sure that you go confirm your orders to Costco or Whole Foods or whoever that we're selling it to that day," right? So, and the new generation comes in and they says, "I don't want to give you a phone call. Just give me an app that I can just upload it and change it." So. And the business on our sales side, they're also saying that I don't want to type in what the guy actually told me on the phone. So what we did was we enabled a mobile app that the new growers and the grower manager or ranch managers, they go in and then just enter the values. It comes directly into our ERP system. So we eliminated approximately 16,000 hours of calls every month. So it's all getting seamlessly. So we are trying to find those. This was one of the low-hanging projects that we took on, like I was saying, not just the big boulders of warehouse management systems and planning systems, but Well,
and that's something that I think CIOs, they probably probably don't really want anyone to mention this or even talk about it, but in a lot of ways, your own sensibilities as how you market to your internal and external customers is much higher in your mind these days. And I think of one of the best kind of descriptions I ever heard of good marketing was years ago, where they said it's all about giving people what they never realized, what they never knew they always wanted. And I
Right.
think when you deliver some of that low hanging technology fruit, essentially you're doing, that's a great pun intended, I guess, since we're talking about
Right.
Driscoll's. When you are able to do that, you're actually delivering something that, so you can delight and surprise people that way.
Yeah.
Were there, over the past year, were there strategic tech priorities, projects you wanted to get done that had to shift around on your priority list? Is there anything that is more important to you now than it would have been, say, a year and a half ago?
Um, I can't think of any of those things particularly.
Okay.
We created those strategies and we stuck to them. As a matter of fact, like you mentioned and I said before, we actually did more than what was expected out of
That's
us.
right. That's right.
So
You over delivered.
yeah, I hope I didn't set a high expectation there.
I think too late on that one.
Right.
Every time I've been involved in anything as an editor in chief, for instance, getting involved with the board, the minute you tell them that, well, we managed to do this, this, and this, and we won these awards this year, and they want to, the next question is, oh, well, what are you going to do for us next year?
Right.
So,
Yeah, so I think the with the big picture, so I think the next 2 3 years is going to be extremely busy for us. So if
yes.
what we think is if we want to do is approved by the board at the end of this year, the next 3 years are going to be we're going to be on a train that's going to move very fast.
Yes. Well, and you don't get to be on the fast moving train if you don't have a great group of engineers,
Right.
data engineers and staff and all that sort of thing. Tell us about your talent strategies and what you're seeing as your challenging areas these days and what you hope to do about it in the coming year.
Um, the one thing that we actually changed as part of last year was we are now trying to recruit people from wherever they're available. So we're going where the talent is. So I have engineers from Canada that are working remote. I have engineers in Pennsylvania where we have very little operations. So we're going to places where we can find resources that can help this company to be a next gen company, right? So that
Yes.
these are the people, the talent that can take us there. So that was the major change that we did. We were always being a global company, so we recruited talent everywhere. We've always been a flex-based department, so people want to work from home a day or two. In the past, before the pandemic, we were always flexible that way. So this just took that up a notch. So we're just
Yes.
expanding that.
Yes. Well, and I know related to that, one of the technologies that you mentioned is a very important upcoming issue for Driscoll's is track and trace.
Mm-hmm.
And I've heard about that like in the seafood industry, where it's track your catch and that sort of thing. What can you tell us about that and the sort of plans you have for more of that kind of technology over the coming year or two?
Yeah, so the produce industry, as an industry, is trying to get to a standard. It's PTI, industry that's an organization that comes back and says, here are the standards of what is the information that you have to put in. And when we started saying, okay, we're going to abide by that standard, we tried to look for solid solution providers, and we couldn't find one single company that can provide that solution. So
Yeah.
what we're trying to do is we're trying to solve some of those escape velocity problems, right? So that the things, what should be the type of label that need to be printed and pasted, and it becomes a little bit more complicated because we are actually packing on the field. So whatever
Yes.
labels that we have to put on, it has to be put on in the farm. And then
Yeah.
and the farm labor is not cheap. It is not easy to find. And any extra items that you want to add to those only adds more problems to the growers, right? So you have to be very cognizant on adding more work to the harvester's plate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But I think we are at a place where I think we have a good solution. It's a combination of multiple platforms that are going to be able to pull all that information together.
Yes.
And so both Amazon and some of the other technologies that are available on the market, we're trying to put that solution together using those.
Do you find, are you needing to bring in more software and data engineers because it almost seems to me like there may be a pendulum swing back to doing a little bit more custom development in-house for very specific solutions. You can't just go to one of the big ERP providers and have them do the perfect system for you to use because you're the fresh food slice of the food industry, which is huge. How do you approach that?
Yeah, it's extremely important to understand your business and what is so unique about your business.
Right.
Everything that is standard, that like the whole financials part of it, the warehouse part of it, it's pretty standard. It's been an industry standard for a while now. Do not try to engineer that in the company, and that's what some of our company team members were trying to do in the past. So
Yes.
What ends up happening is there is no way you could compete with the innovation that's happening out there with the limited number of engineers that you have, right? So you want to make sure that you take advantage of what's happening outside, but to understand what is that unique requirements that our business has, and only work on those and bring in engineers to first understand the business, why it is unique, and understand and build those technologies in-house and own it.
Right. Right.
But then you need to make sure that you have a strong integration platform that ties all of these platforms together, because you don't want to create an environment where information is siloed. That's just going to be a death of yourself. So you don't want to do that. The first thing when I came to Driscoll's was to make sure that we had a strong integration platform in place. And then we started, in the past, it used to be the ERP platform, the center of the universe, and everything else is rotating around it.
Right.
These days, in my mind, and then probably people have other opinions, but having a strong integration platform is the center of the universe, and then everything else, big, small, and everything is just going to rotate around it.
Well, and anytime you start, whenever I get into conversations about IT modernization or taking care of technical debt issues, you're exactly right. I mean, without that strong integration platform layer, it becomes so people intensive, and nobody can find that much talent to be doing. And also, it's not fun work. You want to have your data and software engineers using all that innovative brain power to come up with new approaches rather than doing a lot of manual labor, essentially, from a technology standpoint. We got a question from our attentive listening audience here, wanting to know, with all the change that is going on at Driscoll's, how are you handling organizational change management with your business partners? And you had mentioned that you're considering now some of the big management providers. You've got 4 or 5 of them to come in and talk about the organizational strategy and to make those big picture plans for going forward. But in the meantime, what is your particular philosophy about organizational change management?
It's a great question.
It is.
It's not an easy and single answer for that, right?
No. Those tend to be the best questions, aren't they? The ones that you have to say, well, let me think about that.
The answer is very situational as well. So when we are going through, and this is a question that we are all facing, and the business is also facing, when we're going through this next 2 to 3 year big enterprise business application implementation, which is not ERP, a single platform, there are certain roles that will become irrelevant. There are certain roles that we didn't have that become that open up, and there are new skill sets that would be required to be brought in-house, either developed or brought in-house. So as a matter of fact, as part of this whole EBA or enterprise business applications implementation, we are also looking at change management and organizational structural changes that we are
Okay.
looking at.
Mm-hmm.
For example, there was no business, and there was no team sitting between the business and IS before,
Mm-hmm.
and that was a gap. We were actually filling that gap based on some of the pulling some of the resources from the business, and my business relationship managers trying to step into that role, but
Yeah.
having a counterpart who can speak both languages, the business language as well as IS languages,
Mm-hmm.
equally was a gap. So as we are deploying more and more technology, that is becoming extremely clear to our business partners that, hey guys, we need to have somebody like that, because this is not a one and done technology implementation, but this technology is going to live on even
Mm-hmm.
after the implementation. So they are now starting to think of permanent roles that need to
Yes.
be created on the business side that will first partake in doing these implementations, part into this business transformation, digital transformation,
Mm-hmm.
and then eventually once that is done, here are the activities that they have to take on once that is done. So
Right.
whether it's process reengineering or process improvements, in the past they were called business process owners, right? BPOs.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know what the latest term for that is, but
I know.
the
What's
roles,
the
I'm trying to describe the roles that we would probably need, and
yeah.
we're thinking through all of that. It's not easy. It's
Yes. No,
it,
it's not easy stuff. That's probably why the question I think there's a lot of interesting conversation around it. And I think a lot of this too is driven by all the agile ways of working that have come into being in the last several years, but I think especially in the past year. And I don't just mean agile technology methodology kind of stuff. I mean the actual getting across to the businesses that they are just as involved and responsible with the technology projects as the information services department is. That's a new way of thinking for some business partners, isn't it?
as a matter of fact, the term that I use is all the projects have to be business led.
Okay.
There is no IT projects or IS project. There is
Right.
none. It
Good.
has to be.
Mm-hmm.
There has to be a value proposition that the business actually has to bring to us,
Yeah.
and then we become the partner to have that recovered, right? So that whatever value proposition that they're putting, we partner with the
Mm-hmm.
business to make that happen, to
Yes.
get to realize that value.
Yeah.
Um, and that sounds a little counterintuitive. It feels like why does IS department give up control when they have the keys? They should be able to dictate what projects they need.
Yeah.
But yeah, I can assure you, you'll be very unsuccessful if you go at IT-led projects. That I have never seen a successful IT project done if business is
I know
not
there's
equal or the
well, we're all
partner.
familiar with all the kind of the awful statistical numbers about level of failed IT projects and that sort of thing. There's a lot of analyst organizations that, have made a lot of bread and butter telling IT leaders and managers how bad they are at getting projects done. And now then they're not projects, it's business products that
Mhm.
everyone is working on. It sort of just changes the whole mental mindset, doesn't it?
Right. Make sure that your business is successful. You will get the credit you deserve at
Hmm.
so that's why when business is leading and you're making them successful,
Yeah.
leading those
Yes.
projects or outcomes, you'll be recognized no matter what. So don't worry about that.
Right.
Keep the business
Exactly.
in the forefront.
Well, and I think that's why we'll see going forward. Hopefully, CIOs like yourself and other IT leaders will be having far fewer of those conversations about IT as an OpEx cost center and more as a strategic business partner. And we've all been. I remember from the last decade or more at CIO magazine, we were writing about that constantly. It takes a really long time for these concepts to kind of sink in and become reality, I think, for both sides of the business, for the business and the technology areas.
Right.
Okay, let me see. Let us talk a little bit about data management and data projects. What sort of data strategies do you have under development going forward? That is something I find that cybersecurity customer relationship management software and data management tend to be, they take up a lot of headspace for CIOs. And I know when we talked about this earlier, you said, yep, that's the three. So tell me about your data strategy.
Our data, I have to be very honest, has been very siloed because our systems were very siloed, and then the platforms that we deployed was very siloed. So with the introduction of these integration platforms, we are now trying to sort that out to make sure that the
Good.
data actually gets to become information rather than staying as data, right? So as we are connecting the data, we are inserting the master data, who can actually put the master data in, who manages that, what is the governance around it, and who owns that data, right? So that's we are very early in that journey. To be honest, we're laying down the technology footprint right now using AWS Data Lake, pulling all the data from different systems that we have and trying to gather some meaning out of it. So there is long ways for us to get there, but at least we've started. It is all I can say at this point.
Well, and I've never noticed that there's any great reward that being an early first mover in new data technologies has really, it doesn't deliver those benefits. It's one of those things where as the technology, as you mentioned, the integration technology platforms, all of that makes such a difference. And the kind of products and the technologies that are coming out from the vendors and providers, actually there is a lot of that advances every year. So I wonder, I don't think organizations get penalized anymore for not having the latest and greatest data management
That's true. And also it
technologies.
is driven by the business, right? You have to know what you want to see.
Yes.
What information do you want? It has to be driven by business leaders or department leaders, because you don't want IT to create some KPIs for finance department. Doesn't make any sense.
Right.
So this is where the business has to be empowered and educated on what kind of insights would they like to get, because that all of that data and information is sitting in your backyard, and they have to drive that within the department. And
Well,
I force my business to demand from me what insights would they like to have from me.
good. Good for you.
What when you walk into your office and there is a TV in your office, what are the 5, 6 KPIs or information that you want to see displayed on that, so you can start off your day checking that off?
Yes.
I don't want to be the one who should be driving that. They should be saying, I want to see this information, and that's how the BI platform should be built out, not based on technology.
Exactly. Yes. That's one of those problems that IT leaders have gotten into over time, where they present the executive dashboard with all the information we think you want to see, and then nobody uses it. So it can be the big problem. Well, let me do for our wrap up question here. Tell me about, with all the disruptions of the past year and what we've all been through, what has this taught you as a leader? You have been in CIO and global CIO roles for a while now. And when you look back over the last year, how has all of this uproar, has it changed you or advanced you as a leader?
I think one of the biggest thing that I enjoyed or learned a lot is how to be very patient. You have all of these pressures coming from your business because they were underserved until now, and they want to get everything done yesterday. And then you have this pandemic hit, and people are trying to figure out where are they working, what are they working, and what times and they can work and cannot work. And so there were a lot of things that we had to figure out. So as I started this meeting with how do you plan for a hybrid workspace, the 4 themes are some of the themes that come to my mind. Is that make sure that your attention to people is personal. Make sure your expectations, your own expectations of how people should be, and matches with the expectations of people who are working with you, your peers, and then build a trust and just trust your talent. those are the things that those are very important lessons for me in the last 1 year.
Well, and I think too that the popularity and the rewards that come out of authentic communication between leaders and their staffs, I think that whole dynamic has kind of softened, changed. It's expanded a lot in the previous in what we've all been through in the last year. I just think that there's a lot more empathy and authenticity between leaders, and CIOs get to a certain point in their career and they feel like they're not supposed to show weakness and they're not supposed to not be the one with the answer. And now we come to find out that it's much more trustworthy if you can show up and say, I don't know the exact answer to this. What do you think?
That's showing vulnerability is extremely important for me. Being
Yes.
human, to be able to
Mm-hmm.
say that here are all my faults, and I know for sure all of us have done mistakes,
Yes.
and you grew through making mistakes. Nobody had been perfect, and say,
Mm-hmm.
hey, I am who I am because I've been perfect.
Yes.
That I have never heard that. So um, and actually showing some vulnerability and saying that, hey, I'm just like you. I
Mm-hmm.
was lucky enough to be where I was, to be in this position.
Yes.
And as a matter of fact, anybody and everybody could be doing what I'm doing. It's nothing
Mm-hmm.
special. And I was just a little lucky to be in here. So
Mm-hmm.
showing vulnerability is actually very important for me,
Yes.
to be
Good.
honest, and build that trust.
Excellent. Well, I think that's probably why you have the good reputation that you do, Kieran. And thank you so much for joining us here today. It's really been lovely talking to you.
Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity.
Absolutely. If you joined us a little bit late today, don't despair. You can watch the full episode later today, both here on LinkedIn, but also on CIO.com and on our YouTube IDG Tech Talk channel. CIO Leadership Live will also be available as an audio podcast by tomorrow, wherever you get your podcasts. I hope you enjoyed today's conversation with CIO Kieran Venkamamidi, who is with Driscoll's, on their way to becoming the berry providers to the world, and that you'll come back for our next episode of CIO Leadership Live, which will be 2 weeks from today on June 30th, again at noon Eastern. And I'll be joined 2 weeks from now by Mojgan Lefebvre, who is the Chief Technology and Operations Officer at Travelers. Thanks again to our friends at Cisco for sponsoring this episode. And do take a moment to check in and sign up and subscribe on our YouTube channel, IDG Tech Talk, where you will find all of our previous shows. And at this point, I believe we're up over 75 of these conversations that are all waiting for you there on the YouTube IDG Tech Talk channel. Thanks so much for joining us. Stay well, and we'll see you here again in 2 weeks. Take care.